Hello everyone, it's me Michael, and this is Bore Me to Sleep, the series dedicated to helping people sleep. More specifically, this video will lull you to sleep by boring you with unintelligible nonsense. For this episode, I'll be using vocabulary and sentence structure that vaguely emulates electron philosophy based on Plato's work, The Republic. I've used machine learning to generate a monologue that doesn't make much sense in order to provide you the same comfort as falling asleep in a lecture. Please don't try to understand the script. Many people enjoy falling asleep to videos like this, but some can't as the material is too interesting. The words I say will vaguely pertain to the subject, but will be fragmented enough where meaning can't be found. The effect created is a boring lecture where you can't understand or pay attention, even if you wanted to. Therefore, I suggest you get comfortable and try to sleep. Let the words wash over you and let your mind drift. If this video helps you do that, please consider supporting. Liking, sharing, and subscribing help these episodes reach other people that need them. By the way, Bore Me to Sleep is ever evolving, and I'm continuing to dial in my delivery, cadence, and overall sound. I try to make myself sound more boring in these episodes, so let me know what you think. Ultimately, this project is for you, so your feedback is hugely appreciated and will be used for continuous improvement. Also, for those who enjoy a little extra ambiance, episodes are uploaded alongside an alternate version with added background music. Some people find soft music or atmospheric sounds help them relax even more, so that option will be available. I will now begin the lecture, so please enjoy and sleep well. Of the arts and sciences, I feel by some of them in the argument, on one of his faculties and the other most general are the morally lost of the knowledge, which should be in the world of their country mind at any rate of voice, and their name when a man will begin to pass on a level of law, or that they may a common sense of the young God is neither. Having a mind of true being, will we to say what just is to be happier, and we should further imagine whether the other case is a mind, is not more than the course of ages to him. The church which is there is no further good in good or morally lost, stating both of necessity about nothing, and vice or any sort virtue are proprietary, of pain and motion are things, and they all by things necessary to many states, and to be heard or be tested by the higher reason of reason, when the time of individuals were larger than them, to him to raise up a man, and as the fear of some one work, to a state of good, then of the whole state, the whole drone is more of a dog of his writings art, than the world he is full, to be the same and unjust would be ashamed of good citizens and health. At true conditions, having the greatest of them no habit, and is such a medicine as a parable, as strangers whom we were saying about dangers and justice than the gods of men, and ordering of their own conviction to what you would make me to have the rulers of the rest of our state, and that they are in order to beat the simple music of gymnastic men in education, and simplicity in the soul of our state. Proper excellence are being one now simple, or will be a small picture of life, and which they will be are in the vision of truth, who has been first of the light of their own time at his proper life, and the rest of the other states are concerned. The law of one person is simply a further question to be a long matter. To the rulers themselves, all things great and all will pass them, and the term of all the touch, a philosophy, and by an application of human life, in which are others, or figures in our state if there is no difficulty in seeing the third element, in which the individual is supposed to the light, and the argument of any one in whom we were speaking of the science. An imitator, and then the imitator will be such a good person, will find what they hold not truth and in their own lives. The tyrannical man is like a noble following right, and just like the very best. Unjust is to be taken, the skilled has a finger in the laws, and their own lost very best, in a sort of skill, and much with the other body, so the power of the appetites is still less. And the rule of the sexes, and the soul of the workman has been such as he is unable to try his own meaning, or be philosophers of their own interests. But what is good for him, and what is the next step from our philosopher, and the process of the idea of creation is in the real world undue. His true object of the world below is the servant of a tyrant from his father and his own fear. His ideal injustice, being only a true ruler, must always remain for the greatest incentive to the morally lost in the state, which is not at any third part in the greatest and divine number. Most had not in most cases wholly different countries, and of lives and philosophy are the mathematical sciences of the soul. The state which is the myth and the matter to us, of frame and education where training of the person, of such a state was not of a slave, or a well ordered state of course, only one or other miserable of his own, when he is speaking of a person of the same only, for he is a tyrant of thought only to be the good of being, his own is not easily, would be at any rate, to be forbidden laws, but rather in a life of man, who is of a few happy than himself in the intellectual, which he is one who is the son of his remark that is the greatest of the further less, which the absolute square is the square of number, 5 oligarch ideas of Plato, is very charming. In the republic of the whole knowledge to a life of ideas or God, in the case, now the time of the other will be able to infer from the class of war but to their existence also for good, and unjust is the truth in which also wise a nature in the moral, and the one would be any one who has the most unjust than both, and not the most people who have similar qualities, nor must only be injustice against the opposite class of true, but in the same time as they do now, to do always repeating the same manner of others with the opposite names of wise in things. We only make the four of the given forms, in the same as the republic of a whole, or the one with a real reputation of existence is an art of thought. Defined by Glaucon in this republic, there is a bad and in the other condition of the state they say that the philosopher is necessary to the master of his art, and is a measure of a camp, men who have come to the resistance, as they ought to be the good by the name of the image, which can be easily reproduced, useful in the principles of the subject of the guardian. The manner of justice, and is justice of the just man, and right is good as the wise morally lost, good and morally lost in the state of his soul, and of a philosopher is necessarily in a less of a perfect state, in the place of the work and the past, and of the fairest of justice and modern times and in any other dialogues, nor does not apply to go war the highest part of the soul. For morally lost must not be made by the art of medicine, to logic the virtue of the perfectly more, two distinct faculties to the relation of one of the four virtues of the work of the soul as a common, or in the relation of the good in the 2 degrees of the harmony, or is the paradox. The next, third subject, on which the other now the narrative comes full, an imitator and the man of another father is not such a kind, and worse unable to play the practice of reward, who is likely to be corrupted by the art of knowledge or of going any other men of the tyrant, and noble the state of his fair work and disease, and the best of them master. These men, the life of the right of morally lost has the greatest effect of a man that may be understood, and also that he can safely his own interest, and not his friends of a life in his soul, and is his good, is above life and morally lost for a man. Of his subjects, who is a man, by statesmen whenever a man has a sort of opinion that he can never have a happy life which he afterwards, in a distance, imagine in the relation of the visible world, a natural individual and the whole state of vice. As a man could have been the same, a man or a mirror, a true pilot would bring into the existence the market, and become only a person and a good person. They will make state of him who is an athlete to be different from that good, or unjust. And this will be not good as his own subjects and his own interests in the same way. House truth above the true opinion of the things in which best able to be very true being divine. The skilled reason of the world number of a carpenter, or where they mean the soul, who is not, who should have been more, of thought to be part of justice and aught of good. They are by the interests of the nature of the state. You have already given them to the question, is another way about the eye, which is his disease, and sight is the slave of all truth, and of all existence. The one is stronger and being essence of opinion, but the good soul of the man is also a philosopher. The rest of the gods should be the son of the other father who had the eye of heaven, and the son was left to the middle and the condition of the eye to the sight of the superior, and the laws in which the other place is also chosen by them, and become of the war. They pass to one another to take his own business in him, or ought to be a medicine, is just now. That the way of the blind to share in all the distance, and are very clear, clock in to ourself, and command, and the second virtue of such a state need is not an outline of whole within the gods. And at any rate at all, he is more or subject, or as one of the reverse of form, and first happens the change from the whole body, and which are the world of most powerful natures than a state, which is also concerned that which is the body to be a person in the old world, in his heart, though he were saying he can do such, like is the right or the other the knowledge, of the fair we had a psychological, physical higher than either, more part of a bad class of nature, and the latter appears to the effect of the actual creation is held to be a part or sense. He is just now is thirds in such, that as he is too miserable for a use of his art, a rare just soul will be clear to know that all weaker power to the friends and the morally lost as a man, as a similar habit and anything of people. Those who have not thought so among them nor will conform to this other good of the truth, which we most likely to arrive when a poet can hardly be said, of all new problems, and even in the majority so far, so ordered of state, would seem to be in an almost spirit so case, that which they could have their place and held up their own property and power of their own city. Even he was difficult to imitate the art of fiction only to have the idea of a good is above all things, the most part of the state, and of all is not only to be a rule of man and also become the better, far better of his life, than of a state and bad taste only of the truth, and who has a great rule between men and who those need. Could he have not been ill, doing that which one thinks is so high of the highest degree, which each subject, the man which the subject is permitted to the shepherd from his supposed, to the most part of the good word, he is not a ruler and a poor man of the world, or less worst, of less angry, when justice is the qualified object of the virtue, and injustice is a shadow which gives no question, is for not theirs which is not impossible by the corruption of the men. To the unjust in my request, and not upwards, any of just a man, an hour of God who is worthy of a philosopher, and has no lost his noble qualities in the least liable of his childhood. The tyrant is ready to be the better he, and he shall be unable to fight in battle, and will win with fear and qualities of them and unjust. They will not be the ruling of who loves of truth, and what is the morally lost, which is not the ideal life of the highest or inconsistent, which is to be the sphere of morally lost, is that of knowledge the man which has the animals to be saying of the highest degree, that in the 5th century are in a bad as saying as they are now, moving in their wealth, strength, and injustice no one can argue. About any of the amount of pleasures which family out in the righter state, is the art of a bed and the ideal state which has come only by a worse life than his own age, and the last future most true of all their own notions who are of the use of them, and education which will only be a man in so far short of them, is not the same control in the soul as a man, is not one or a husbandman or a man. The addition of a state for the use of the term is a virtue, of a vision only in a greater kind in which the fact is supposed that they waste their lives according to their lives in their parents, and the one of those whom came in him, when you are quite right in your ideal. What I said you are right and not convinced what a man is to be right sense, but of course when the same law of them is his own desire, and some other sort of government which is left good in him. The war of the den was not to do with him at all, but he would not give back his life as a matter of play or profit or a man, will be a chance of the desires and the tyrant of the sun himself. When the just, and just mean I, suppose something also of the lie in such as the Republic, he is a more important element of life, but in the words of the book of the soul, of the previous question he cannot imagine that he should mind in the word, or of the soul has left a body within remaining. The cobbler to others as rich to the state or as pay of the art of women and children, The first of the honor is to be due to the best, and not to the state of guardians, and now having you of opinion, something more than their great things must act, as are the best to be attributed to his father, and would not be the truth of his own. He will also not write or have more easily discovered any of other life, which they have become their subjects, who are now down by the power of reason, ought to be the guardians of his own time, and are here to have been in other principles. As the number of souls is a man to a slave, who is no longer eyes to beware true simple, and that these should have more use and in the world. But if he meant by him is not more easily ready to admit, that he may be morally lost as well, as he is a real own form of mind, or any other man is harmony for it, but not true, when the three used in the state are a place of which is to us, and their good is the order of any civilized race in the first Greek state. And the first as the state shall be carried out in a matter of desire and escape, the one with the human, all is he only a lover of life and a man, who is immorally lost, and a state outright, to learn them, and not of the mere, but only will he find fair, and also the master of his soul, and that the rest of the poet becomes a bed. He must also have to come back under the rulers of poetry and of life. Like these are there not in the world, which law of the highest degree of virtue. And being the nature of a house is also the same as in good of him in the greatest of our, whom they would fight, that in time no state was good in order to be a worse, and the one who has the same God is a ruler, and the builder to be more than the true good and unnecessary pleasures, and a man in his soul, and his body will be the monster he is best known for, whom he has no more of those life, such as those to be found by the art of temperance. And also in the Republic he gave a difficulty in saying, or at our previous form of justice is a risk of being, and so. And of the state he would say that he would imitate the better, and he did not. And the other is the person who has seen in youth, with the whole of young life, so as we are speaking of all things being of the good physician, and the unjust need of the unjust is his injustice, which is not a fair of the arts and of the poets, and the lover of Greek order, that philosophy, than all of these has most perfectly just believed, all have been in his power to imitate a philosopher, who were not aright in every age, nor of the Republic may have been said to be an imitation only for this, is a mean of life, and that of the human soul is a gentle nature of the sun, and in a small world, he is most one who is educated by his own opinion and very important way of human life. These were not of the most original principles of law, and with a human virtue as good, and the earth and the subject to the original portions of the fourth division, the ear as well as the romance of injustice, is the rest of the nature and the subject in the highest degree, that all of which are things to experience, in which we should nature of the city, and there are the government in each of a soul, and which are not the vision of a true nature of soul. Those who have been in the same part that in this country are the one and the only man of a slave who is ill, the remaining of a wellness of life, and the natural gifts of the soul of the body, for which has a better man at his body, that he is an ill is natural to himself, or not to others, and is likely to be a cobbler or a man of knowledge, or of gods, or not men in thinking that higher nature is wise, than in the course of his own time, and have common property. There is no small fault in the law, and will the man of his happiness and morally lost life, that he is well, and not be regarded as a man of life or a lover of earth, and is the subject of the state, and the agreement of men and the rest of the state will make an origin of both just, and the origin who of the other of the greatest part of the state, while the man will be of able to use, that the natural and morally lost should have an advantage, that this is the way that which the music and the intellectual world in the heavens, in the same degree that which is not sight, but only this one other sort which gives the world to a man of virtue, and woman who has the first element, and education of the world is a base, or of the base of the poets, and the ear of a lover of life is of a sort of thought, and is just to be found in a well. The citizens of the others have their own business in order to find that the best of citizens and not of life, of their subjects there is way, of saving desires, and now under the child of corruption of principle, for themselves, the very reverse of which I can no longer harm. One of the others who have more trouble, whether you can think, that I am not talking about us to go to the guardians, and not just very now where you would imagine that the soul will not be in marriage. In deed and power, and deed in the most, love of them, life of the soul and the good soul to avoid the good of our guardians, is not he who would be by his body as well as far of the body, and as the soul of their country, the mind. It is a disturbing influence over any one of the truth, which is the original nature of a subject is the soul, as an idea, is not a mere matter of nature, and the Republic may be now known upon, which a period which may be described as these men to have put their peace in their own a future life, as a single one would take of a way of a like. And after the true knowledge of mankind he is right, in a mean of the Socratic, the honor of freedom and of his family are the one shall say, that for the good is a true philosopher, whether he who is not a mind in life, to himself and a lover of himself, is not allowed is a sort of a tyrant who is the fact, who is a fair and tyrant is his perhaps wish him to be him change. At which he was going to bring back again of this state, and not only his bad taste, being now that they are at the age of birth laws, and they will be of our slaves, and thus we will acknowledge the same words and states, we shall see the order of the city, in the body democracy which the power of them will be his words, which will be the sort of lie in order to exercise the truth of his family. There has been modern philosophy or a Greek fiction which is apt to be neglected. It must be of a modern, as well as of a truth, he is not very natural. He is an enemy of the city only in the clouds of day. To his pleasure he will soon let us take the words which is the beautiful of this, which will hardly be supposed to be in a sentiment of a man. His life may be a friend or a lover of a labor. Out of the tyrant himself, he will no longer be best to a gentleman who is no likely to be a cobbler, and just he is good in this world, done another, and justice in the states of nature, not as a life and in the state of our state. We must not be able to see whom I have now made a double sense, but now you will please that in time be most true to science, and of being no single one or anything else, would he wish to suppose that the philosopher may be still more unjust, or worse, than the least act of the use of the state in the first object. The individual in the soul is not a fair sight for the last touches, which we were saying to them in our state, such as that you have been in a condition of life that they are not like to be leaders, and in giving name also the opposite, who is the only able to be a philosopher in his eyes, and of their authority, there were no good to hold he cannot act, such morally lost, just, and is the interest of their friends and good, but he will not tell the lie between them. And when it is the only light, and the true in the third class of the poets are termed, but always these things possible with very persons who work for the state, and others held to die by the eternal, and not with one of these things not being able to break down from the world of the state, of which we see how the state of the state is to be found, only that if the gods have gift of their elder only dogs, as to be the acquisition of the opposite inviting to the principle as the good. And most of the unjust is good, and good and true, but when he is put to one another with the unjust as well, he is in his own mind. He is no use or anything of it will be angry with another, and at the same time will have no need for our young, and God we must receive our only view, to the effect of the others, and whom they are in good disposition. He who at the world of man who has been in the need of good, to be master of good, who is the interest of the stronger and his interest, and the company of mere depths, which is a shadow of it, and the interval which the ideal in the lie is the third and fourth book is the question which Socrates has poetical form, for he should have his experience of friends and morally his own noble things, will likely be to lose the guardian of the highest knowledge. The true nature which the world has always another man, might be the taste which will not have money, or he has a time to rest and an easy desire which again and the philosopher having further different next forth. Also in the Platonic message, Plato makes the Republic happy and the first elements lead him in a state of the true philosopher, and the unjust in the state is the slight of the highest part. The unjust man is saying that knowledge is to be ruled from the truth of knowledge, and of the pleasures of things which cannot be the first of soul to the oligarchical state, and the two or morally lost can be the knowledge of a good, would not be found in reality has a beauty of city, who is the cause of beauty and still the idea of mighty. And the army of state is going back to war with his future notions, and in the full sense he is aware That the criticism of being divine as free as we were just, they realize the best born of the state is to be sphere of the just, and the four others, just when we shall see them, you shall be a little more of my meaning in me. To look only good and order, but to the work of the world, and manner of the laws in his soul. There was the ideal of a further class of life is always in a respect, but only in his own age is the greatest tyrant poetry most often into the world's soul, and consume into the trouble and do morally good lost. Old question is not the virtue of being wise by all of his nature and good, for we have already told of more unjust than we cannot have discovered. He is not a healthy guardian who is most likely to be allowed. To be wise men is worse than for the best of their morally lost, which cannot light in the best of those whom they are imitators in the state. As guardians they will have been of poets, or any of the scene first life is able to become a disturbing element of life, and the management of freedom in the art of a pilot is just of course. He is too well aware that the art of a city is a greater blessing to the condition of our state, and that we are to be by law of the state, and you will have a true philosopher of his own land. He is a good one, or again, who is ready, by other artists, from those who are best in the city of the state, will be certainly in order of the same sphere, and justice and other virtues of goodness and perfect are consequences of life. I do not mean to be a great master of all of these, and so she is part of men, and bad and education must be proper. To do their meaning, there is some good always morally lost to a good of morally. He has no knowledge to be wise if he is not likely to be guilty of such marriages, or in virtues as of war, and absolute truth, and for the gods of like offices are to be as good of one man as true, but as perfectly true to the human life, or such a man may be compared to the modern thinker, as well as in another, the equal of philosophy, and like a philosopher, is readily or false if he is to have the greatest of the tyrant into being unjust. Is not the reverse clear? That is justice and the interest of the stronger will you have. Of the arts and gods and of the others of the state, they should have no longer have any money, such as a number or any previous expression of any man in form. The same Roman Empire is the lover of the tyrant and the citizen of the child of his journey, and that they had a place of his youth, of that state is his family, in whom he has been a measure of the state and wise, to the rest of the same in which the same man is a good, and good miserable when a play of the pilot can be trained. In the guardian and other command of their very own duties, to our friends and good how, one with the right to be ignorant, or place, in whom the education of the unjust needs to have more easily allowing other honors, and not the most, that which we know the answer is all of the other things. And the man is the form and wise of the good of morally lost, and the good are bad, and both wicked in men, and never enemies to receive their whole life into true body, and always will be not of the love of himself, or of these things to man, that he would have to honor his father and not fail in verse this principle in a single age spirit, which begins in a veil of politics and education. The other is a man in a part of the soul, which is the maker of the same disease in this state of book, of the republic, what he is to acquire his name into his own money, and is the love of himself, and is the great and necessary of all things God, which was the most natural, in which the use of the present or more particular, and rule of justice in a well. A great work of the human body and the nature of the Greek question, is he of a genius passing into the first place, and better, or hurt as worsen, as he will be in the state to be able to give reason, and when his due to the shadows of the old man is the ascent of the ideas, not only in the Platonic sphere of the mind, as he has supposed the nature of the Greek character of the subject, and also the maker of the unjust who has a power to be of a good, and greatest of all things as public as the state they appear to be on their own business, but that they are the same, or the name of the others who desires to receive their wealth and virtue. This is like the one only necessary to be the best and most quietly governed over the state, which were not to be called and have received from them to us. To be useless to the city will be like guardians to be doing the best guardians of the good of the rulers, and the true of nothing, but they do mean by some cases in our land, and hands that as ages in home and in the rank of the past. They in the same shall be the same maker of social life, and in the sense, he has said of course that there are also nothing of the use which I thought, and to teach such a state being is to be a less, and you will have been heard in your name, and I will hear you to be a more of them. They have been said for themselves, and men in common for the rulers tell them about they, which they hear as certain of all states. The like state will be of the education and state, and the education of each individual are not by the son of the whole state. And as the worse, because he is one of the state to the just, and state of the just and unjust man is just a lover of life, but such is one left to them in fact the same fashion in the laws. In the things that are ascribed to the Roman Empire, setting a step of Plato, concerning the pleasure which the principle of appetites, and of just is what I mean in saying that the state of which are the law, and they are just as far as one another in the actual state only if one class of the soul will be coming to understand as a dog of our own state. This was the best in all men and all very things of the state, but is what we also took at the end of an intellectual rather than at the ideal of state, as well as the science of dialectic, is done far of the same rule, and this other form was real, and yet the two I am from, which the law of the good chief and to regard in the state in the same, as which one of the greatest of all things in the sake of the poet or true, and remember of the just. When you have already done to them how far we can tell them, of him he is no question which will have the interval between them, not only by a color, those of all principles, the greatest of citizens. And other is the skilled, the other elements of each thing is a soul in which the disease and nature, we are also speaking of an imitation of ages. At the end of the poetry and the ancient enmity, the tyrant soul in the first of the sun is the true sense of the soul and is his mind. We have a difficulty in saying or being an end at the subject, and rather virtues in the man or the manner. In our term, the sphere cannot be nothing, which we have thought to be another shall only be angry at the same time. With that, we allow them to be the sake of common parents, and these, the just man is utterly unjust who would imitate the nature of his own life, and classes are well in the world below. They will never not have for his supposed parents, will be as such for him who are weaker friends to be true, and true indeed of morally lost. Enemies, and he will have his own words, which morally lost is the measure of the soul which is unseen by them. When they were pain and not the properly to apply law from the highest part of the state, which you described, are not having to our own old philosophers, which are very true rulers in their own subjects. What is their way with the soul, and the other is not only so again in a camp or man some other, or only to have the difficulty in practice of way, and not being old, the latter is the case of the highest kind, which is the philosophers are full of wits, and doing their business, or that subjects are to have their own opinion of them. To be a better part of a human race in the greatest terror of the good chief. Of the small is more of the newly governed. To the three parts in the soul as a degree of imitation he is not a person who knows that any virtue to him is the spirit of the philosopher. He is here only as a philosopher in right, and is one of the unjust men who should be the son of his father and his father and mother, and is not a good state, but the same degree cannot be truly ordered with one or four in the same degree of knowledge. The nature of science and harmony in sciences, the same name which is the source of each generation, when we were seeking to do the same knowledge of the subjects, but to be what we make of them, is not what they are but in a similar quality, with which will be the men who have been their meaning, but of the arts and a good which is supposed of by body, the guardian of wisdom, as which she is in the same, and at this you are not at the end of some part, and others, in the parts of arts, as in the poets of the base of a great genius, as they were in the most part of their lives as he are held truth, to have the warrior sense that a human life is of the world and of the soul, which is felt only by them as the subject of being and the rest of ancient philosophers. Only then has said to be written as the nature of doing any one poor and the life they are in the other of. As women have received from the soul of them, this leads to the interest of the soul which we are able to learn when we come to tune their music, and the guardians of the den and Homer in the water, which comes from him at his distance and has no more than the like, or he will be so and many more of them. Having us at the same with difficulty and a satisfactory manner of argument, I wish like to see many things about the opposite of the origin of the state. If I had only one question, I can say to them, I mean that they are to be lovers of life, which are then must be good. The life of a philosopher one of the visible, and end of the world in the same degree he was not supposed himself, or idea of true pleasures like the other virtues will be required for world. The education and therefore they will be endured, to be young in one another, and though the pleasures of money, who are not their own words, but they will not be young nothing, to be like those who are weaker and worst. To the new state of state is not either of the highest nature in the same thing of the soul himself, and in the case of the dead, when they are already in the state of good friends of man and injustice, shall be the poetry of the soul of nature. She has a further right in the form of science and knowledge of the soul, and the rest in the laws that are just man, shall live and unjust, which is the unjust of not our own age, being of the world, and we have a sufficient term, to be old and the others to keep the world another to the good. The ideal state of unjust and just is less and ill and only health, and the modern who has not endured the true educated cannot be observed by them themselves. The city for a few only, there is a few in no other, and any other doubt for the present of morally lost is not visible for all things, and of the good and the state in the soul of other words. The rest of the rest will become an easy time, and this is another form of feeling, which we may find a character of Plato, hoping to have fallen into the politics of his own at first Troy, and in his journey, then at a distance, and then again at a sense, and at the end of a soul, as the virtues take care of the body should be the virtues of their strength, and others appear to be there in their own opinion. To be in any way which the present one and more not being whose spirit is a good man or drink, makes the interest of the morally lost not gain by nature of being in a principle of justice. The community of property is the same of each, and as the will of the one or the word opposite. Two opposite as the party in the state of the fortunate or the dramatic once of the ideal state, or of the truth of the unjust, and now we will tell us that the word has been taken away. Speaking of the story of the discussion about justice and knowledge or the truth, that we are to give him back into a model state. Justice and knowledge not only for the opinion of others, but there is not an actual particular animal drink which is the state. It has a many philosopher, in fact, as one of the nature of a soul to be attended, there is not a theory of a man who is a community of property in which the soul is not at the end, in which the natural or nature, and that when it is an essence of the whole world, the knowledge of owing to both a training, which are controlled to him condemned by an enemy of a well. The laws of the state is full of a ruler, at the most part is not only good, but is wise, and is pain to the morally lost state of the morally lost. And he will be able to do the true love of any state which is qualified equally designed, for the body and for the sake of the results he can be. The sole most use of his father or bad man for a deposit of religion, and begin with the earth or any other interval in color, like a life, of such a part is at a greater time and of knowledge. The best of one which they see the state and which they have no idea of them. And we may also consider the opposite of many. We will precede her to the spirit of Homer and the poets who are able to have been a noble spirit of ideas, of mankind, that they were able to be greatest of their own unhappiness, the greatest of the ideal church in the middle, and see the book in the interval between the two, the third and most perfect of the four virtues of the soul in the family, and from the city of the absolute, and although so I say the fair, the most miserable of all things is not of any particular kind of knowledge in the same age, come out to his earliest life, and he can be seen to have the place of which he is seeking to use the same, or knowing whether all subjects are the best thing for their subjects. Your own improvement of their art at the same time. He does not act the son of the measure, and they his words are good under the world. What is always nearly the truth. Poets are not of the art of gods, and all men, whereas the good of gods are morally lost, and the education is the best and appointed by us. But if the whole Moor was never appeared to his own work of philosophy, then he is seen to judge only by the true argument of the company, is a master of fortune to the state. This is what I know to be the physician, not to have been made of another and the greatest happiness which is the world. Original meaning was just and therefore to some meaning other. He will be able to attain only that one of his eyes, and the temper which in the world below in the royal. After the eyes of the fourth, they must go to the understanding of the city, or to express the Greek, or 5 to 10. at which he is full of the middle and saying the true musician of the stronger, and other to the morally lost. The greatest happiness of the body or the good is most morally lost. Of his tyrants, subjects, and morally lost, which is a mere money, the better like the tyrant is the unjust, which will neither be having a true artist, who may do something which is their own business, or that sort of being his body is a shadow, who never himself was great in a single person, who may set the soul which he had made, and confusion in mind which I will not be satisfied with the idea of good, is more than just is unjust, those ruled by the lover of knowledge into the soul. There is a further height of a dog in the soul, the son of education and anything else. The others will be more of them in those who are leaning in him in public, their own life with another. To more than all, the eye of the human race is the same. He should place for the good state of the good soul. The analogy of a passage in the higher sphere of a family, or to have the same spirit satisfaction to his mind in his own condition. That we are to receive what of the greatest to them is not very good. The order in which to part makes the man in a state, and this is the better good. The world and more of the divine government in which he is speaking nothing is the whole, and only useful, but an interest of the gods of state, which he will be able to do in the greatest of their own. Life in our full of men is not a general, who is one to be the ruler of the cause of a bad, and the relation of the whole state to the whole state is a mere one with a divine. A person and their friends and the morally lost is the reverse, and what is the truth becoming of a man of speaking to be person? They may be using a lie to the ideal of arts, and a language of a lower spirit of their value to the Spartan Plato. It is the first principle in which the first of an individual, but the government is now the spirit of the study, and the philosopher is the last of the law, and the most perfect of the most naturally superior sense, which is the most, in each thing, of the others who offers this knowledge has to be found in the world of us, and must not be taken in the highest direction which are used by these gods. The men of the philosopher who has the least of truth, and all morally lost of all things, are also the latter beginning in this world of our state. There is nothing which only comes from us to draw out of the planets, and are to be the last of the enemies of them, for they will have to go no need for any state, or state, to any other thought which is ever realized in their own comparison state by him. This is the very war for their art, and not knowing the sake of their art, and also of the same government which will rule out the world in which it is realized, and we call the meaning of them. So therefore I should not say any of the soul may be any good, is the same way to being for an individual. It is also a very ruler and similar partner for the rest of Timaeus. It is mere imitation, and seen only in the hand of the perfection and the state. The one and true of pleasure and pain is the interest of the stronger, which we seek to use them in their own person, and let explain to them in any way. If I think that you have a mind to this, and the words like a character are a constitution in a marriage, in the middle days he should have his charming limits to the islands of the laws which are supposed to learn from time to time. The time of state is the same thing as an imitation. The maker will not be happy in the discussion of anyone which was already given to the mind of language. And to have an interval by a truth of mankind which is the most part of morally lost state, the nature of the soul and subject to the worse, and the unjust is a man at all alike, which is not a morally lost, and that control in the state whether private marriages will be best, being still more or good, and will not be a man as a young man in the warrior class, who has not been made of a sort of honors, and a study of pleasure and education will be a dream and suffer. We have been done to admit that if a state of city, he meets therefore he is greatly able to do not set about him, and having so many of other manners, can no more particular or no longer a state of ill, we sufficiently realize that in the course of ages or son, or take away into the world of honor. The reason of this is because he has no described meaning in apprehension, in order to understand that he is no longer a man of boxing, and he is distinguished at all way, and that the animal is utterly ludicrous. To be the subject, to attain pleasure and not to his interests and weaker, but morally for lost good is well to their own business, and better portions of them are things that we allow that the rest of our own master. their superiority in common pleasures after the public hope. As we come back, this is not full, and at the time of the most part of man and of us, which he has need to be given, which Glaucon you are merely to be the best of law to the god and not any other, with which they like to receive a vision which is the real of ruling and the more existence of state in which each of us is not the same, but with himself nor is the excess of other tempers, of the laws, of one another and the greatest of their faculties, and that we are mere of them until we shall say, from the argument and other, as the art of their auxiliaries and qualities are women of the proper good of them, and after are the good and the necessary, they are able to be permitted to war and the enemy of the city, and he will be able to his father who is most likely to his change, and being public, received, deceivement are in the philosophers and appointed by the citizens. In their whole life it is general after their life is not only the most natural gifts of the state, and the whole idea of which each are both in the city, and at the state are of the other and the most useful when the proper is under an approach, and in the work of the god in the republic is only a disturbing element in which they may be natural to inquiry. With the world below, upon him he answered by her own way. To be mean is not only in the beauty of Greek, but the other is the narrative means, made by this question, made by a great thing. At the present way there is but a touch of an idea into the mouth of the poet. Now, the decline which were the light, upon by the sight of barbarians who are now last, years of it we have not called in the same way, which the unjust have the guardians and be done by there are the most abode, in the contemplation of the whole of the life, which has been easily felt, as yet hardly realized, for he is not only a lover of gymnastics, and are noble, or of inferior nature. The defense of men who has the interests of idea about injustice is not the interest of stronger and nothing to be found in learning good, which is also never really owned, morally lost happiness, will be the first of the cause of it, and that containment in the state of marriage or thought let him near. The Greek first principles in him we shall be, of a more happy just. Here when you were saying that justice and virtue are beginning to their satisfied, as I shall, have also now known that has perfectly used, for the useful when their simplicity of the state of honor, the best one of another, and the other is most of a well-ordered state. Two or less of small parents or individuals who are just one of divine subjects, with one another, and so the same thing cannot be strong with a single father, or in some degree the latter, or parable, which preceded as you will not say that the injustice is useful in motion. The courage that we must also consider is that there is a possibility of representation who has been of a man of a sense would. This has been such a marker of the Republic, and of the Timaeus is more almost extreme, as we were able to describe now each of the state, each to be a certain kind of existence, then many of things there are some other of them in the soul, which our citizens is to be their wives and philosophy. The philosophy will take on a common opinion which is the essence of knowledge, and the music of the son of the modern race from the noble, the place that the first and the citizen, third part is the nature of the soul as well, the ideal of each citizen, and for the minds of the urges, he to them with the earth, where they have been the old and names too apt by us in the latter nature. They were seen to be numbers certain of the pleasures and number of which there is no other, and each other removed is to behold the most particular or worst human mode of speaking. It is a more part of the whole city in which the state, more of all in far greater degree that the keener comes, having a house or between a well. A state of sense and the fact is that a further part of a good man is a lover of nature, which is required to the rule of morally lost, which is a state and has the music of true philosophers, or the master of the rest is the ally. The common men who are supposed at Sparta through the dead, and the rest of the other are subjects to the oligarchical state, and the man is to the ideal of the maker of the Timaeus, and is a third happiness which principle of the pleasure, of health of the soul, or of the soul of the whole may be truest, or to be true by them as for they cannot tell us, but when they are not poets as to be in a similar kind, he is the power of mankind, not of the states but the soul of the subject. To anything without any art, or to the learning does not be able to do so well in the useful. which he had been observed to have been by him and many a man to philosophy and himself. The road makes to the unjust another small comes into the soul, which he receives into him who is great and philosophy and in the morally lost soul. They are just under all things in which you give the idea of a state of virtue, and another, and then shall now know the ideal good in the state, and just as the others will have done to them, and so of their own life has done his own good soul. As the word adds to the just, and so unjust now tells the imitator of such men, it is now in the third class of the soul that we have far most of the poets to them of a mere community of the body. The greater and as the original philosophers are well imagined the same thing to the nature of man, and as the first next question has a quarrel between pure understanding, and as the meaning of the law of their objects as Timaeus is another in the same degree. The good is their good and morally lost and bad, and what is mere but not rest of the both gods, and not knowing virtue as a person of death, which is penalty, and has an original nature of those state Plato. He is a philosopher as well, and other virtues of the state, but that the government has also the poets and their young will be as their simple music, which will be able to second state and elevating education, which we go back to the perfect state, that having true being great and steadfast as professors of philosophy, as they should be thought of in the city of true taste, that their own proper modern existence becoming a man for a noble youth, who is not at all end of the intellectual world, and in any other world by virtue of the world, it is in the laws, he does not see the education of the noble. Passing into the other and true upper world, and is the man of a true truth, the gain of our own day and the one of all things heaven were held into the purely element of them and the ordinary sound. But neither will naturally different animals is to be called temperate, and for one form and of the other wise. Those who answered the man to a private short of generation were used to the use of the man visible world. In a battle which you will not have been inclined to persuade injustice or the truth, they turn in them into our state now having a way with their own interests, and happiness, and the gods not be perfectly for the natural order. It is not right to answer in that he is not truth. Of a just and he is true of gifts and in all existence in the government of state. He need to be said to be patient, and in a city we should begin to find the other of the city, and the author of morally lost of man. It is not the same of himself, and men in the same true again, and the rest of the state will be kept in their eyes beside the other true commonwealth. We may note that the subject of one another to the parts of the body of the objects of science, and the idea of good as well of them. He has the principles of which sort of the youth have been a whole state of the world. The truth may be a philosopher in an ill order of man, and the laws of the soul take to the subject of the visible world. Of the whole, which has also the body in an oligarchy or habitat, is less likely to fight in there, not more, and he is said to require many other things in them for the souls of which they have described, and are all sorts of persons to the use of very rightly, and who has now the state of use, for they will have to go no need for any state, or state, to any other thought which is ever realized in their own comparison state by him. This is the very war for their art, and not knowing the sake of their art, and also of the same government which will rule out the world in which it is realized, and we call the meaning of them. So therefore I should not say any of the soul may be any good, is the same way to being for an individual. It is also a very ruler and similar partner for the rest of Timaeus. It is mere imitation, and seen only in the hand of the perfection and the state. The one and true of pleasure and pain is the interest of the stronger, which we seek to use them in their own person, and let explain to them in any way. If I think that you have a mind to this, and the words like a character are a constitution in a marriage, in the middle days he should have his charming limits to the islands of the laws which are supposed to learn from time to time. The time of state is the same thing as an imitation. The maker will not be happy in the discussion of anyone which was already given to the mind of language. When the just, and just mean I, suppose something also of the lie in such as the Republic, he is a more important element of life, but in the words of the book of the soul, of the previous question he cannot imagine that he should mind in the word, or of the soul has left a body within remaining. the cobbler to others as rich to the state or as pay of the art of women and children. The first of the honor is to be due to the best, and not to the state of guardians, and now having you of opinion, something more than their great things must act, as are the best to be attributed to his father, and would not be the truth of his own. He will also not write or have more easily discovered any of other life, which they have become their subjects who are now down by the power of reason, ought to be the guardians of his own time, and are here to have been in other principles. As the number of souls is a man to a slave, who is no longer eyes to beware true simple, and that these should have more use and in the world. But if he meant by him is not more easily ready to admit, that he may be morally lost as well, as he is a real own form of mind or any other man is harmony for it, but not true, when the three used in the state are a place of which is to us, and their good is the order of any civilized race in the first Greek state. Now the time of the other will be able to infer from the class of war, but to their existence also for good, and unjust is the truth in which also wise in nature and the moral. And the one would be any one who is the most unjust than both, and not the most people who have similar qualities, nor must only be injustice against the opposite class of true, but in the same time as they do now, to do always repeating the same manner of others with the opposite names of wise in things. We only make the four of the given forms, in the same as the republic of a whole, or the one with a real reputation of existence is an art of thought. Defined by Glaucian in this republic, there is a bad and in the other condition of the state they say that the philosopher is necessary to the master of his art, and is a measure of a camp, men who have come to the resistance, as they ought to be the good by the name of the image, which can be easily reproduced, useful in the principles of the subject of the guardian. The manner of justice, and is justice of the just man, and right is good as the wise morally lost, good and morally lost in the state of his soul. To look only good and order but to the work of the world, and manner of the laws in his soul. There was the ideal of a further class of life is always, in a respect, but only in his own age is the greatest tyrant poetry most often into the world soul, and consume into the trouble and do morally good lost. Old question is not the virtue of being wise by all of his nature and good, for we have already told of more unjust than we cannot have discovered. He is not a healthy guardian who is most likely to be allowed. To be wise men is worse than for the best of their morally lost, which cannot light in the best of those whom they are imitators in the state. As guardians they will have been of poets, or any of the scene first life is able to become a disturbing element of life, and the management of freedom in the art of a pilot is just of course. He is too well aware that the art of a city is a greater blessing to the condition of our state, and that we are to be by law of the state, and you will have a true philosopher of his own land. He is a good one, or again, who is ready, by other artists, from those who are best in the city of the state, will be certainly in order of the same sphere, and justice and other virtues of goodness and perfect are consequences of life. I do not mean to be a great master of all of these, and so she is part of men, and bad and education must be proper. To do their meaning, there is some good always morally lost to a good of morally. He has no knowledge to be wise if he is not likely to be guilty of such marriages, or in virtues as of war, and absolute truth, and for the gods of like offices are to be as good of one man as true, but as perfectly true to the human life, or such a man may be compared to the modern thinker, as well as in another, the equal of philosophy, and like a philosopher, is readily or false if he is to have the greatest of the tyrant into being unjust. Is not the reverse clear? That is justice and the interest of the stronger will you have. Of the arts and gods and of the others of the state, they should have no longer have any money, such as a number or any previous expression of any man in form. The same Roman Empire is the lover of the tyrant and the citizen of the child of his journey, and that they had a place of his youth, of that state is his family, in whom he has been a measure of the state and wise, to the rest of the same in which the same man is a good and good miserable when a play of the pilot can be trained. In the guardian and other command of their very own duties, to our friends and good how, one with the right to be ignorant, or place, in whom the education of the unjust needs to have more easily allowing other honors, and not the most, that which we know the answer is all of the other things. And the man is the form and wise of the good of morally lost, and the good are bad, and both wicked in men, and never enemies to receive their whole life into true body, and always will be not of the love of himself, or of these things to man, that he would have to honor his father and not fail in verse this principle in a single age spirit, which begins in a veil of politics and education. The other is a man in a part of the soul, which is the maker of the same disease in this state of book, of the Republic, what he is to acquire his name into his own money, and is the love of himself, and is the great and necessary of all things God, which was the most natural, in which the use of the present or more particular, and rule of justice in a well. A great work of the human body and the nature of the Greek question, is he of a genius passing into the first place, and better, or hurt as worsen, as he will be in the state to be able to give reason, and when his due to the shadows of the old man is the ascent of the ideas, not only in the Platonic sphere of the mind, as he has supposed the nature of the Greek character of the subject. This concludes the 1 hour lecture. By now, I hope you've fallen asleep. If not, you might consider playing another episode from this series, or simply replaying this one. Thank you for listening, and I hope you fall asleep soon.